1. In the summer of 2004, I was on my first break from college. I had just completed my freshman year and I, at the time 19, female, was missing being away from my new college friends. One Saturday night in July, my college friend, Julianne, from out of town was having a birthday party. She wanted to invite lots of friends to a hotel room for drinking and hanging out. I was kind of a late bloomer and really just started driving my freshman year of college. Back then, I was naive and apparently had a look of friendliness and helplessness, as I always tended to have strangers trying to talk to me or come to my aid when I really didn't need anything. I was excited to be going to this motel room party. I arrived in the late evening. It was a Motel 6 outside of downtown, near an area that used to be a shopping mall, but it just started its descent as a new mall was being put in the other side of town. I'm thinking she chose that mall due to the price because it wasn't near our college or near anything that you would want to be near, unless she planned on doing some shopping the next day. There weren't that many cars at the motel. I got out and went up to the second floor where her room was located, at the corner, near the entrance to the parking lot from the front road. There weren't many people in the room, and it was a typical motel room with 2 queen-sized beds, a bathroom, and a TV. I remember taking a beer and having a few sips. I was feeling slightly uncomfortable. That was mostly because the usual college pals weren't there, and we weren't doing our usual thing. Normally, my boyfriend and his roommate would be hanging out, and we'd watch a weird movie and have an interesting conversation. This time it was just people talking and drinking. Kind of boring for my tastes. Plus, I'm a pretty major introvert. I was kind of looking for an out. And when there was a lull in conversation, I told Julianne and her boyfriend John that I had to go. They walked me to the door and we said a few goodbyes while we stood on the balcony overlooking the parking lot. While we were talking, a taxi cab pulled up to the motel right under the balcony where we were standing. I looked down as a man got out of the back of the cab. The alarming thing was that as soon as he got out, he stood and looked straight up at me, staring. He had no expression on his face, nor did he make a move to go where he was headed or even to pay the cab driver. The cab took off, and he just stood there staring at me. He began to smile in a very creepy way, like he knew he was scaring me and he enjoyed it. But at the same time, it was like there was no one home in his eyes. He looked at me as if I was the only one there, and as if he expected me. Like in some parallel universe he was supposed to find me, like this was his whole night's purpose. It was unnerving. But then he walked off. We just kind of joked about it, and then I went down to get into my car. I unlocked my door, put my purse in the passenger seat, and just as I did that, a car pulled up right behind my car as if to block my exit. I looked over, and it was that man who got out of the cab. He apparently had a car, and as soon as he left from staring at me, he got in and followed me to where my car was. He just parked there and was staring at me with the same creepy smile on his face, but with no other indication of any self-awareness. The only thing I could think to do was run back up to the party. Unfortunately, I left my purse in the passenger seat, and left my door unlocked because I was so freaked out that I just wanted to get as far away from this man as possible. I knocked on the door and told my friend and her boyfriend. John came out to the balcony with me, and the car was still there. We called the motel lobby and asked for them to send a security guard to escort me to my car. The guard came by, an overweight fellow who looked really unhappy to be there. He just knocked on the motel door and didn't even walk me down. He barely even said anything. He just stood on the balcony looking down. I got tired of the situation, and since the creeper's car was gone, I decided to just race down and get in my car and leave. John walked me to my car though, since the security guard was being a weirdo. I got in, started it, and zoomed out of there as fast as I could before that man showed up again. I did pause in my car to make sure John got back to the room safely before taking off on the front road. But my doors were locked, and I was ready for imminent exit. This might not seem like much, but the way the man just got out of the cab and looked up at me really freaked me out. It was as if he was coming to the hotel just for me. He wouldn't have been able to see me from his seated position in the cab, which made it even weirder when the first thing he did was turn his head up to see me and stare. He didn't seem to have a room, and I wondered afterwards if he had a car that he used to block me in, why he needed a cab at all. My purse was still in my car and nothing removed from it, so I don't think he was there to rob me. That's what's really scary, that and the fact that he acted like my friends weren't even there. For weeks later I was shaken by what could have happened if I didn't leave my blocked-in car as soon as possible, and I began to imagine scenarios where he came up to the window. The only imagined scenario that made me feel any safer was if I acted insane. I imagined getting out a knife, but that didn't help. Not until I imagined laughing maniacally or barking did I feel like he may have backed off. To this day I carry a knife in the car just in case, but I feel like that may not be the best protection. 2.
This happened 2 nights ago, so I'm still replaying it over and over in my head. I thought this would be a good place to share. I'm a pretty predictable person with a predictable schedule, so I'm not sure if this was a random occurrence or if someone knew my nightly routine. I'm a 35-year-old woman. My husband Rob gets up for work hours before me, so he goes to bed before I do. I usually get to bed a few hours after he does, around the same time every night. I turn off the lights and the TV in the living room and take my dog to the back door to let her out. The door leads to a large deck outside. Off to the right of the deck is a few steps down and a small path to a gate, which we always keep chained and locked. Every single night before opening the door, I peek out of the window right next to it without disturbing the blinds and flip on the deck light. I never expect anyone to be there, and we've never had a problem with anyone trespassing or trying to break in. It's just something I do every night. Kinda like peeking behind the shower curtain before I pee. I know no one is back there, but if I don't check, then that's gonna be the one time that there's actually someone hiding there, you know? Hey, I watch a ton of horror movies, and it's pitch black outside at night where I live. So a few nights ago, I got ready for bed, went to the back door with my dog slowly following behind me, and peeked out the window. I flipped on the light. My heart jumped into my throat when I saw a skinny, dirty guy in his 30s or 40s standing off to the side of the door, facing it. I see him raise his arm up and hold a screwdriver above his head as soon as the light went on, preparing for someone to open the door. I screamed, "Rob, get up! Get the gun!" as loud as I could, which startled the guy, and he jumped over the rail of the deck and ran. My husband ran out of our bedroom with his gun. He called the police, and they showed up within 5 minutes. They drove around trying to find the guy, but no luck. The guy broke the lock on our gate to get in. He also pried open the back screen door, which we always kept locked as well. If I would have opened that door without looking out first, I might be dead. I don't know if I caught that guy trying to break in, or if he was waiting for me to open the door like I do every night. Either way, it was fucking terrifying. My parents are buying us outdoor security cameras this week as an early birthday present for Rob.
3. I'd actually kind of forgotten about this until recently. when my memory was jogged by seeing a few other stalker-type stories on here. I downplayed it at the time, which seems disturbingly common. And it's only now, in hindsight, that I realize how skeevy the whole situation actually was. This gets pretty wordy, but bear with me. So this was some years back, when I was only 16. For reference, I'm a girl. My family had recently moved cities, so it was a whole new neighborhood, new school, new friends, all that good stuff that comes with a more major move. I had to get used to not being able to walk to school too. I had to take the bus downtown, and then walk from there to get to where my school was. Which was a first for me, since all my previous schools had been within walking distance. Now, the bus system itself wasn't a problem at all. What became a problem was that apparently someone started watching me at the bus stop. About 3 months or something after the move, I created a Facebook profile for the sake of some competition or other, you know, like this Facebook page for a chance of winning this and that. I had nothing else on this profile, at all, beyond my name. This was before it was borderline mandatory to be active on Facebook. No picture, no information, hadn't even added any friends. It was blank save for that 1 or 2 liked pages. I halfway forgot I'd even made the damn profile. But then, after a few days, I got an email alert for a message on Facebook. So I went to see what was up. It was from an account that was just as empty as mine, and it simply said, "You're cute." What? I was, and still am, pretty cute, but nothing out of the ordinary. What puzzled me the most was obviously how whoever this person was would know that, because no, I didn't recognize the profile name at all. And of course my profile didn't even have a picture. I replied something like, thanks, but how would you even know? I wasn't really seeing a red flag yet. I was a little curious, a little flattered. I was still a bit naive, I suppose. So I got back. Now I've seen you at the bus stop, and that didn't sit quite right with me. Obviously. At the same time, though, I was telling myself it wasn't really a big deal, and I didn't feel too worried or anything. This was a very nice neighborhood, and I'll mention that I'm from Sweden, which is generally safe. Still, that didn't explain how he'd know my name, which is what I asked him next, how he recognized me. He said he wouldn't tell me unless I added him on MSN, the chat client predominantly used at the time, and talked to him on there. After a little back and forth, I gave in and added him on there, primarily because I wanted to know how he'd gotten my name at all. It's not a common name, and I was feeling pretty antsy about that. Part of the reason we'd moved was to get away from a few people. I felt that I had to know how he'd found me, so I'd know in case any other people did. His text language was pretty flirty and all. He threw in lots of wink smileys, but from the way he typed, I got the impression that he was around my age. He had a year in his username that I assumed was his birth year, and if that was true, he'd actually be a year younger than me. So I still didn't feel too worried. But I got pretty uncomfortable when he told me how he'd worked out what my name was. It was from the school yearbook, which doesn't seem that much of a stretch at first. I know, but the thing is that in this city I'd moved to, what they do is that they compile all the schools of the same education level in the city in the same book. So we're talking about 15 schools in that book, and a few hundred pages of photographs. And he'd gone through all of them to find my face and name. I actually checked when he told me this. I wasn't in any obvious place in this book at all. I had no particular spot dedicated to me or an activity I was in. It was just this group photo of my class, about 25 students. I think about 2/3 through the book. Plus, if he really was a year younger than me, he himself wouldn't be in that yearbook, or have ready access to it, because he'd be in a different level of education. To any fellow Swedes, I was in my first year of gymnasiet at the time, so he'd have been in högstadiet. This didn't cross my mind at the time, but again, if he was a year younger than me, what, he'd either had to have looked through his yearbook first, then moved on to a yearbook that wasn't for him. Or he'd seen me at school too, and known to look at the right one for that reason. I didn't really tell him it creeped me out, but he'd start chatting to me on occasion from then on, about mostly normal or inane stuff. So that was fine, I guess. Always with this flirty tone, though. I replied neutrally, or sometimes played along, trying to get an idea of who he was. He said he was a neighbor, and that's when he'd see me at the bus stop. But he'd never told me what he looked like. And when I was at the bus stop, nobody ever came forward as him, or signaled in any way that they might be. Like I said, I didn't recognize his name, if it was even real. He definitely wasn't from our apartment building, though. And for some reason, I didn't quite believe him when he said he was from the neighborhood. So I started to feel pretty uneasy at the bus stop, when there were other people there with me, wondering if one of them was him, if he was watching me. But waiting alone at the bus stop didn't really help either, because I started wondering if he was watching me from somewhere else. The stop was situated near a grocery store with a parking lot, so he could have been. I'm pretty sure he did tell me, "You looked cute today," or something similar at least once or twice. But I honestly don't remember much of what we talked about anymore when we did chat. I remember they were never very long sessions though. Only 10 minutes to half an hour or so. And I started not really liking seeing him sign on, but for some reason didn't block him. Probably because I still felt I had to work out who he was, and because, well, I didn't feel threatened by him, just uncomfortable. You know, just. Until at some point when he told me, "I found a picture where you live," acting as if that wasn't creepy at all. That skeeved me the fuck out. I asked him where he thought I lived, which was maybe a stupid move, but yeah, he gave me the right number, and the right floor, and the right apartment. And at that point, I was definitely feeling less uncomfortable and more scared. He went on to say that he worked this out because a friend of his had lived in our apartment prior to us, and that the timeline for me appearing and his friend moving out made sense. I didn't believe this at all. In that case, he'd have worked out where I lived a lot sooner, and if he had, why was he only telling me this now? To fuck with me? But if he hadn't found out that way, then what? Had he followed me or something? From the bus stop? I don't remember what I told him, but that scared me big time. A day or so after that, he sent me a message that was something like, "Maybe I'll come over and say hi." And I don't remember the exact wording, but it actually read very threatening to me. It read differently than the other fairly normal stuff we talked about before. And I had such a spike of fear when I got that message. It didn't matter finding out who he was. I didn't want him to come over at all. I remember looking out my bedroom window and being relieved there was nobody outside. And I sent him a message back that I don't want him to come over, ever. He sort of threatened that he would, and then he signed off. I blocked his email and his empty goddamn Facebook profile. And then after I'd done that, I was left feeling really anxious and frightened, thinking that maybe now he'd come over anyway once he'd realized I'd cut off all his other options. That maybe he was on his way right now, and then what would he do? I didn't really fear for rape or murder. It was a little too abstract to me at the time, but I was still really scared. And for a while after that, I was scared at the bus stop too. I was scared walking home from it, in particular after school. But nothing happened after I'd blocked him. It all just kind of ended there, which, in hindsight, I consider myself extremely lucky. I was definitely dumb and naive at the time because I didn't mention any of this to my mom or stepdad. And if whoever this guy was hadn't been willing to give up on me or lost interest or whatever happened with him, things could have gotten really, really ugly. I was always waiting at the bus stop myself, and I was often home alone if I'd had a shorter school day. And he did know my name, and where I lived, and I'll say it again, I was only 16. It's possible it was just some socially stupid kid with a distance crush and not knowing how to handle it. But thinking back on it, it seems like it had to be more than that. Either way, I'm glad I never actually met him. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to my collaboration with MaddMike. Thanks of course to everyone who allowed their stories to be used. I would of course like to say a big thank you to Mike for reaching out to me through Twitter and asking to do the collaboration. I'd also like to say a very big thank you to Mike's personal trainer, who I don't know who you are, so I can't shout you out by name, but it seems that Mike's trainer is a fan of mine and has been talking me up to Mike, and that's why Mike decided to reach out and ask if we could do a collab together, so thank you very much to that. Now I just need to find out who the personal trainers are of all the other YouTubers whose work I enjoy, to see if they'll put in a word for me too. I did initially have a glitch video planned for today, but I decided to just go ahead and get this collab up. I didn't want to keep it waiting too long. I'm not sure exactly when Mike's part of the collab is going to be up, but I did a very nice story for his channel, and I'll link to his channel down below anyway, and when the video goes up I'll link to the video specifically. So if you could just click on over and check that out, and if you have enjoyed Mike's work here, I encourage you to check out his work on his own channel. I certainly encourage you to head on over and maybe give a like and a subscribe over there too. Okay, I think I'll head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.